My dad mocked me as a failure, tossed my $20.00 Cape Patek Philippe gift aside, until one choice I made shattered his world in days, leaving secrets I never saw coming. The ocean screamed that night, waves crashing against the jagged cliffs of Port Salis like they were trying to tear the town apart. I stood on the balcony of my cliffside condo, gripping the cold steel railing, the salt air stinging my face. Below, the Pacific churned under a bruised sky, and the lighthouse beams sliced through the fog, a lonely pulse in the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another voicemail from Mom, probably begging again. I didn't listen. Not after what Dad did. Not after he stood there in front of everyone and threw my $20,000 0-cent Patek Philippe watch onto the table like it was a cheap trinket from a gas station. "You think you can buy honor," he'd said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You'll never be enough." Those words burned, hotter than the California sun, and they pushed me to a line I never thought I'd cross. What do you do when the man who raised you, the man you spent your life trying to please, spits on your every effort? You stop playing his game. You burn it all down. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 34, a software engineer who clawed my way to a 7-figure startup in San Diego. Port Solis, this postcard-perfect coastal town, is where I call home now. A place of Spanish-style villas with red-tiled roofs, cactus gardens blooming under relentless sun, and a harbor alive with sailboats swaying like dancers on the waves. The air smells of salt and smoked brisket from beachside grills, but there's a shadow here, beneath the beauty. This town hides secrets, and my families are the darkest. My father, Raymond, 63, is a retired Navy officer turned port manager, a man carved from discipline and disdain. To him, life is a battlefield, and weakness is a death sentence. He's got a jawline like a steel trap and eyes that judge you before you open your mouth. Growing up, I was never the son he wanted. He dreamed I'd follow him into the Navy, wear the uniform, live by his code. Honor, sacrifice, silence. Instead, I chose tech, building algorithms that keep Fortune 500 companies safe from hackers. By 30, I was pulling in millions, but to Dad, I was just a keyboard warrior chasing easy money. Mom, Evelyn, 60, is a retired elementary school teacher, soft-spoken and always smoothing things over. She's the kind who rearranges your kitchen while saying, "I'm just helping." She avoids conflict like it's a contagious disease, but her silence enables Dad's tyranny. Then there's Claire, my 30-year-old sister, a painter with a gentle smile and a heart Dad calls grounded. She's the golden child, the one who calls every Sunday, who lives by his rule. I love her, but her loyalty to Dad stings sometimes. I paid for her art school, covered her rent when she was starting out, but I never told her to tell them. I didn't want Dad twisting it into some story about me showing off. The trouble started 6 months ago, though the roots go deeper, tangled in years of resentment. I'd been the family safety net for too long, paying for their roof repairs, Mom's new SUV, Claire's gallery openings. They never said thank you. It was just expected, like I owed them for existing. I told myself I was doing it for peace, for some shred of their respect. But respect doesn't come cheap, and I was about to learn how expensive it could be. It was Dad's birthday, and I decided to go all out. One last shot to bridge the gap between us. I rented out the Crest, a swanky seaside restaurant perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The place was all glass and driftwood, with waves pounding the rocks below and fairy lights twinkling like stars. I spent $3,000, 0 cents, on catering, Dad's favorite smoked ribs, lobster rolls, craft beers chilled in buckets of ice. Claire flew in from Santa Barbara, playing peacemaker as always. "Just try to get along," she said, adjusting a tablecloth. "He's still our dad." Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one he looked at like a mistake. Mom arrived early, rearranging the napkins and telling guests she'd planned the whole thing. I let it slide. The night was for Dad, not her. Guests trickled in. Dad's old Navy buddies, neighbors, and a couple of port workers with sunburned faces and loud laughs. Dad walked around like he owned the place, pointing out a cracked tile on the patio, asking if I'd fixed the leaky faucet in my condo yet. I kept smiling, pouring drinks, playing the good son. Claire shot me encouraging nods whenever Dad and I managed a civil word. After dinner, with the sun dipping below the horizon and painting the sky in shades of fire, I saw my chance. Dad was alone by the railing, staring at the ocean, a glass of bourbon in his hand. The waves roared below, a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I pulled the velvet box from my pocket, the weight of it heavy with hope. "Dad," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "Got something for you. Happy birthday." He turned, his face unreadable, and took the box. Inside was a Patek Philippe, a sleek silver watch that cost me $20,000 0 cents. I'd spent weeks researching, picking one that screamed success, engraving it with "Thanks, Dad" on the back. It wasn't just a gift, it was a plea. He opened it, stared at the watch glinting under the restaurant lights, then looked at me. No warmth, no surprise, just a cold, hard stare. "You think you can buy honor," he said, his voice low and sharp like a blade sliding out of its sheath. "You'll never be enough, Ethan. Never." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The chatter of the party faded, the crash of the waves grew louder, and for a moment it was just me and him, the lighthouse beam cutting through the fog behind us. I didn't say a word. I reached over, took the box, snapped it shut, and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I turned and walked away, past Claire calling my name, past Mom laughing with a neighbor, past the bartender offering me a beer. I stepped onto the cobblestone path outside, the sea air cold against my skin, and got into my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw Dad still standing there staring at the ocean, unmoving. Claire stood at the edge of the lot, her face a mix of confusion and worry. I drove off, the roar of the engine drowning out the waves. That night I sat in my condo, the watch box on my coffee table, the city lights of San Diego flickering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The ocean was quieter now, a low murmur beyond the cliffs. I'd spent years trying to earn his approval, paying their bills, fixing their messes, swallowing their insults. For what? To be told I'd never be enough? The test was over. He'd failed, and I was done playing the good son. My phone lit up around 10 p.m. Claire, Mom, then Uncle Pete, Dad's old Navy buddy. I let it go to voicemail. By morning, I had 47 missed calls and 15 messages. Mom's voice was shrill, demanding I stop making a scene. Claire sounded worried, asking what happened. Uncle Pete just said, "Kid, you okay?" I ignored them all, brewing coffee while the voicemails played on speaker, each one a variation of guilt or blame. Then came Dad's. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that hides a storm. "You embarrassed me in front of my people, Ethan," he said. "If you think you can throw money around and rewrite who you are, you're more pathetic than I thought." Pathetic. That word again. It was the match that lit the fuse. They didn't know I'd been their financial lifeline for years. When their savings dried up during a port strike, I started covering their mortgage. $2,800 a month for a Spanish-style villa with a view of the harbor. It was supposed to be temporary, but it became permanent. They stopped asking how it got paid, stopped saying thank you. They just assumed I'd keep the lights on forever. What they didn't know was that I kept everything in my name, every account, every payment. I'd built a $60,000 0 cents buffer in a separate account just in case. I'm not reckless. I track everything. Every transfer, every interest rate hike, every escrow adjustment, in a spreadsheet I update monthly. That morning, I made a decision. I logged into the bank portal, the interface clunky but familiar, and transferred the $60,000 0 cents back to my personal account. One click canceled the autopay. Another removed me as an authorized payer. I called the mortgage company to confirm, the call lasting 9 minutes. The agent asked if I was sure. "Yes," I said. "It's not my responsibility anymore." By noon, Mom texted, her messages escalating from confusion to panic. "Ethan, the bank called. What's going on?" I didn't reply. I went for a walk along the cliffs, the wind whipping my jacket, the lighthouse looming in the distance. When I got back, there were voicemails from Uncle Pete, Claire, and even Dad, his voice tight. "We need to talk. Now." I didn't open his email. Instead, I pulled up my contingency folder. Digital files stored on an encrypted drive locked in a safe. Emails, bank statements, texts where they'd asked for money, never with gratitude. 3 years of proof I'd been propping them up while they treated me like dirt. I was done. The next morning, someone buzzed my condo at 7 a.m. I ignored it. Then a knock, sharp and insistent. Through the peephole, I saw Mom, her face drawn, her eyes darting like she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. She stood there for 20 minutes, calling my name, then slid a note under the door. I didn't read it. I called building security, told them no visitors unless I approved them. That night, another knock. 2 quick taps. I checked the camera. Not Mom, not Claire. A guy in a black jacket, gray pants, face like he'd seen too many bar fights. He looked straight at the camera and said, "Your dad sends his regards." Then he walked away, disappearing into the fog. My Ring camera caught his license plate, a Dodge Charger, black, scratched on the side. The next day I noticed scratches on my door lock, faint but deliberate, like someone had tried to pick it. My neighbor, a retired surfer named Hank, said he saw a guy asking about my schedule. "Didn't look like a friendly dude," Hank said, squinting at the sea. I filed a police report attaching the camera footage and the plate number. The officer, a guy named Torres, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the man's name. Victor Reese. I'd seen him at Dad's party, nursing a whiskey, barely speaking. "Reese's trouble," Torres said. "Used to be a PI, lost his license for shady jobs. Stay sharp." Then it got worse. My ex, Lauren, called me at midnight. We'd split amicably 2 years ago, no bad blood. "Some guy showed up at my office," she said, her voice tight. "Said he was working for your dad. Asked about your money, your mental state, if you ever seemed unhinged." I gripped the phone, the ocean outside my window suddenly too loud. "What'd you tell him?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "Told him to get lost. But I got his plate." She texted me a photo. Same charger, same scratches. Victor wasn't just watching me. He was digging, building a case to paint me as unstable. For what? To discredit me? To scare me? Or something darker? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my contingency folder. Years ago, I'd started saving things, not out of paranoia, but caution. In tech, you learn to back up everything. Emails from Dad to his port buddy Frank about creative accounting for their side business, receipts for a boat they claimed as a work expense, a loan application where Mom used Claire's name without her knowledge. Then there was Grandpa's trust, a $1 million 0 cents fund for me and Claire, split 50/50 when we hit 30. I was named temporary trustee after he died, a role I kept because no one filed the paperwork to transfer it. I never touched the money. I didn't need to. But when I checked the statements, my stomach dropped. Nearly $200,000, 0 cents, was gone from Claire's share. Siphoned through a Nevada LLC called Coastal Ventures. Fake invoices, consulting fees, transfers to Dad's personal account. It wasn't just greed. It was betrayal. I called Claire the next morning, told her everything. She didn't cry or scream, just went quiet. "They stole from me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "From us?" I sent her the files. Clean, organized, undeniable. She called back in an hour, her tone hard. "I'm in, Ethan. Let's end this." She'd been keeping her own records, texts from Mom asking her to lie to banks, emails from Dad about managing her accounts. Together we had a mountain of evidence. We hired James Harper, a lawyer who eats financial crimes for breakfast. In a glass-walled office overlooking San Diego's skyline, we handed over everything. 50 pages of allegations, 300 pages of proof. Fraud, identity theft, misappropriation of trust funds. The house was already in foreclosure. My payments had been the only thing keeping it afloat. Without them, the bank moved fast. That Spanish villa, with its cactus garden and harbor view, was padlocked. A red foreclosure sign staked in the lawn. I didn't stop there. I called the Port Salas Town Council, posing as a concerned buyer. "Heard there's financial trouble on Seaview Lane," I said, worried about property values. The council president, a nosy retiree named Barbara, took the bait. Within days, Dad and Mom got a letter demanding they explain activities affecting the community. Port Solace is small. Gossip spreads faster than wildfire. Neighbors stopped waving. Old Navy buddies stopped calling. Their perfect little world was crumbling. Then came the letter. No return address, postmarked from Idaho. Mom's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. We only did what we had to, it read. We never stopped loving you. I skimmed it, then froze. The last line. Your father didn't tell you about the rest. The rest? What rest? I called Harper. He dug deeper and found it, an offshore account in the Bahamas tied to Coastal Venture. 6 transfers, $250,000, 0 cents, all withdrawn in 2022, right as our investigation started. Cash, untraceable. They weren't just stealing. They were planning an escape. I sat on my balcony that night, the lighthouse beam sweeping the horizon, the waves relentless. Dad's voice echoed in my head, "You'll never be enough." But I was enough. Enough to outsmart them, enough to protect Claire, enough to walk away. I looked at the watch box, still on my coffee table, and made a choice. Tomorrow, I'd sell it, donate the money, cut the last tie. But that letter, those words, the rest, they hung over me like the fog rolling in from the sea. What else were they hiding? And how far would they go to keep it buried? The fog rolled in thick that evening, cloaking Port Solace in a ghostly veil. From my new condo's balcony, the ocean was a restless shadow, its waves whispering secrets against the cliffs below. The lighthouse beam cut through the haze, steady and unyielding, like a warning I couldn't ignore. I leaned against the railing, the cold metal grounding me, and stared at the letter from Mom, still unopened on the glass table behind me. Your father didn't tell you about the rest. Those words gnawed at me, a splinter under my skin. What rest? Another lie? Another betrayal? I'd thought I was done with them. Raymond and Evelyn, my parents, now strangers living like ghosts in some nowhere Arizona town. But that letter, postmarked from Idaho, was a hook, dragging me back into their world. I wasn't ready to dive in, not yet. But I knew one thing. Whatever they were hiding, it wasn't over. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 34, a software engineer who built a tech empire in San Diego. Port Solace, with its Spanish-style villas, cactus gardens, and harbor alive with sailboats, is my home, a place of beauty and buried truths. My father, Raymond, a retired Navy officer turned port manager, raised me to believe weakness was a sin. He never forgave me for choosing code over his beloved Navy. My mother, Evelyn, a retired teacher, smoothed over his sharp edges, but never challenged him. My sister Claire, a 30-year-old painter, was his golden child, soft-spoken and loyal. I'd spent years bankrolling their lives, fixing their roof, buying Mom's SUV, funding Claire's art career, only to be called pathetic when I gifted Dad a $20,000 0 cents Patek Philippe watch. That night at his birthday party, he threw my gesture back in my face, and I walked away, vowing to cut them off. He did more than that. I pulled the plug on their mortgage payments, letting their seaside villa fall into foreclosure. I uncovered their theft from $200,000, 0 cents siphoned from a $1 million 0 cents trust fund left by our grandfather, funneled through a shady Nevada LLC called Coastal Ventures. Claire, betrayed as much as I was, joined me. We hired James Harper, a lawyer who thrives on financial crimes, and filed a 50-page complaint backed by 300 pages of evidence, emails, bank records, even a recording of Dad admitting fraud. Their world collapsed, house gone, friends vanished, community whispering behind their backs. They fled to Arizona, living in a rented condo, driving a beat-up car, their pride shattered. I sold the watch, donated the money, and moved to a new condo with a killer ocean view and a state-of-the-art security system. Claire and I rebuilt our bond, meeting monthly for dinner, talking about life, not them. The trust was now managed by a reputable bank, growing steadily. I thought I was free. Then that letter arrived, hinting at the rest. Freedom, it turns out, comes with a catch. The morning after the letter arrived, I sat at my kitchen island, coffee steaming in a mug, the ocean glinting beyond the windows. Port Solace was waking up. Seagulls screeched, fishing boats chugged out of the harbor, and the sun burned away the fog. I'd moved here for a fresh start, but the letter felt like a shadow creeping back. I called James Harper, my lawyer, and told him about it. An offshore account in the Bahamas, I said, tied to coastal ventures, $250,000, 0 cents, all gone by 2022, and now this, the rest. What the hell does it mean? James's voice was calm, analytical. Could be a bluff to rattle you, could be real. I'll dig into it. Send me the letter. I hesitated. Opening it felt like inviting them back into my life. Instead, I scanned it and emailed the file, keeping the original untouched. James promised to trace any new leads through his network of forensic accountants. If there's more money, he said, it's probably hidden in another shell company. Your parents aren't masterminds, Ethan. They're sloppy. We'll find it. I hung up, but my gut churned. Sloppy or not, they'd stolen from Claire, used my identity, hired a thug named Victor Reese to intimidate me. What else were they capable of? I walked to the balcony, the salt air sharp, and watched a surfer carve through a wave. Port Solis looked serene, but I knew better. Beneath the surface, currents pulled you under. Claire called an hour later, her voice tense. Ethan, I found something. She was in Santa Barbara prepping for an art show, but she'd been digging through old emails. Mom sent me a weird message in 2020 during their Panama trip. Said they were meeting consultants for estate planning. I didn't think much of it then, but now... She trailed off. I remembered that trip. 3 weeks longer than planned, no explanation. I'd thought they were patching up their marriage. Now, I wasn't so sure. Forward it to me, I said, and send it to James. She did, and I opened the email on my laptop. Mom's words were polished, too polished. Met with advisors in Panama City about securing our future, exciting opportunities. It read like a script, something she'd been told to say. My mind raced. Panama, offshore accounts, the rest. Were they planning to disappear? To cash out and vanish, leaving Claire and me to clean up their mess? I needed air. I grabbed my keys and drove to the harbor, where the air smelled of fish and diesel and gulls fought over scraps. The docks were alive with workers unloading crates, their shouts mixing with the clank of rigging. I walked past a seafood shack, its neon sign buzzing, and stopped at the edge of a pier. The water was dark, almost black, hiding whatever lay below, like my parents' secrets. I called Lauren, my ex, who'd been questioned by Victor. Did he mention anything about Panama? I asked. No, she said, her voice cautious. But he asked if you ever talked about moving money overseas. I didn't know what he meant. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the horizon. The lighthouse stood tall, its white paint chipped by years of salt and wind. It felt like it was watching me, waiting for my next move. That afternoon, James called back. Found something, he said, his tone clipped. Another LLC, Horizon Futures, registered in Delaware, created in 2019, same time as their Panama trip. It's got $150,000, 0 cents in it, moved through a series of wire transfers to a bank in Belize. Your parents' names aren't on it, but the agent's address matches a P.O. box your dad used. My heart sank. Another shell company, another stash. Can we freeze it? I asked. Working on it, James said. But Belize is tricky. We'll need international cooperation. I've got a contact there, but it'll take time. Time. The one thing I didn't want to give them. I thanked him and hung up, my mind spinning. Were they still playing games, even now, holed up in Arizona? Or was this the rest Mom meant? The next day, I met Claire at a cafe in Port Solis, a cozy spot with driftwood tables and windows overlooking the beach. She walked in, her paint-splattered jeans a contrast to the polished locals sipping $12 0 cents lattes. I can't believe they did this, she said, sliding into the booth. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from anger. They stole from me, Ethan. From us. And now this Panama crap? What were they planning? I handed her a coffee, the steam curling between us. I don't know, I said, but I'm done letting them pull the strings. She nodded, pulling out her phone. Look at this. She showed me a photo of a document, an old bank statement from 2020, showing a $50,000 0 cents transfer to Horizon Futures. I found it in Mom's old files, buried in a folder labeled Taxes. They didn't even try to hide it well. We sat in silence, the cafe's hum fading as the weight of it settled. The ocean outside was calm, deceptively so. "We need to tell James," I said. She agreed, and we sent the document to him. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lighthouse beam swept across my condo, a metronome in the dark. I kept thinking about Panama, the money, the letter. What if they weren't just hiding cash? What if it was something worse? The answer came sooner than I expected. At 6 a.m., my doorbell camera pinged. I checked the feed. A man in a hoodie, face obscured, standing at my door. He didn't knock, just slipped an envelope under it and vanished into the fog. My heart raced as I grabbed the envelope, careful not to smudge any prints. Inside was a single photo of me taken 2 days ago walking along the cliffs. On the back, in sharp, unfamiliar handwriting, "Back off. You don't know what you're digging into." I called Officer Torres, who arrived in 15 minutes, his patrol car parked crookedly on the cobblestone street. He bagged the photo, his face grim. "This isn't Victor Reese," he said, studying the footage. "Different build, taller. But it's connected. I'd bet my badge." He asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I shook my head. This was my home. I wasn't running. I called Claire, told her to lay low. She was already packing, heading to a friend's place in Santa Barbara. "Ethan, be careful," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't just about money anymore." I knew she was right. The photo, the letter, the offshore accounts. It was a puzzle, and I was missing pieces. I upgraded my security system, adding motion sensors and a panic button. The condo felt like a fortress, but even fortresses fall. James called the next day with news that hit like a tidal wave. "The Belize account," he said. "It's not just money. There's a life insurance policy tied to it. $500,000, 0 cents, with your parents as beneficiaries. Your name's on it, Ethan. And Claire's on another, same amount." My mouth went dry. The room spun, the ocean outside too loud, too close. "What kind of policy?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What kind of—" "Double indemnity," he said. "Pays out double if you die in an accident or disappear." I sat down hard, the chair creaking under me. Disappear. Panama. The photo. The pieces were falling into place, and they formed a picture I didn't want to see. Were they planning to cash out on us? To stage something and vanish with the money? I couldn't breathe. The lighthouse beam swept past, indifferent. I met James at his office that afternoon, a sleek high-rise with views of San Diego's glittering skyline. He laid out the documents, policies from a shady Belizean carrier signed in 2020 during their Panama trip. The fine print was chilling. No investigation required beyond a local police report. "This is legal," James said, his voice tight. "But it's structured to avoid scrutiny. They were planning something, Ethan. Maybe not murder, but something." I drove home in a daze, the coastal highway blurring past. The sun was setting, painting the cliffs in gold, but all I saw was that photo, those words, "back off." I called Claire, told her about the policies. She didn't speak for a long moment, then whispered, "They were going to sell us out." Her voice cracked, and I felt it in my chest, a shared wound, raw and real. We didn't wait. James filed emergency motions to freeze the Belize accounts and cancel the policies, citing fraud and coercion. He pulled strings with international regulators, his team working overnight. Meanwhile, I spread the word. Subtly, surgically. I called Barbara, the town council president, again. "Heard there's more trouble on Seaview Lane," I said. "Something about offshore accounts. Bad for the town's image." She gasped, promising to look into it. By the next day, a certified letter arrived at my parents' old address, demanding they appear at a council meeting. They didn't show. They couldn't. They were gone. But they weren't done. A week later, my car was vandalized, tires slashed, a brick through the windshield, parked right outside my condo. No note this time, just chaos. Torres came, took photos, and shook his head. "This is escalation," he said. "You need to disappear for a bit." I didn't want to run, but I did. I packed a bag, used a burner phone, and checked into a motel 2 hours north, paying cash. The room smelled of bleach and regret, but it was safe. Claire went to a friend's cabin in the mountains. We agreed to stay off the grid for 48 hours, let the heat die down. When I returned, Port Solis felt different. The harbor was still alive, the cactus garden still bloomed, but the air was heavier. My condo was untouched, the security footage clean, too clean. I called James, who had news. "The Belize accounts are frozen," he said, "and we canceled the policies, but there's more. Another LLC, Pacific Legacy, in Wyoming. It's got $100,000, 0 cents, and it's active. Your dad's signature is on the documents." I laughed, bitter and hollow. Of course there was more. There was always more. Claire flew back to Port Solis, and we met at the lighthouse, of all places. It was dusk, the beam just starting its sweep, the ocean a restless murmur below. She looked older, harder, her artist's softness replaced by resolve. "I'm done with them," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm not done with us." I nodded, the wind tugging at my jacket. We made a pact, no more chasing their ghosts. We'd let James handle the legal fight, freeze the accounts, expose the fraud, but we wouldn't let it consume us. The next day, James sent a 20-page agreement to my parents' new address in Arizona. It was simple: relinquish all claims to the trust, admit their fraud in writing, and leave California for good. No contact, no threats, no games. In return, we wouldn't press criminal charges or sue for damages. They had 5 days to sign. On day 4, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. It was Dad, his voice broken, slurring like he'd been drinking. "Ethan, we're done," he said. "No house, no friends, nothing. You win. Just let us have something. We're your parents." I let him talk, his words spilling like waves against the cliffs. Mom was sobbing in the background, her voice a knife in my heart. "You stole from Claire," I said, my voice cold. "You hired someone to scare me. You took out policies on our lives. Parents don't do that." Silence, then a choked, "We didn't mean it like that. We were desperate." I hung up, my hands shaking. The ocean roared outside, a reminder of what I'd survived. They signed the papers the next day, notarized and witnessed. They admitted everything: fraud, theft, the LLCs. They agreed to leave California, to never contact us again. James's team ensured the trust was secure, the remaining funds growing under a bank's watch. Claire and I celebrated quietly, splitting a pizza at a beachside joint, the waves crashing just feet away. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her soda. I clinked my glass, feeling lighter than I had in years. A month later, I got another letter, this one from Arizona. Mom's handwriting, but different, calmer, resigned. "We're sorry," it read. "We lost ourselves. There's nothing left to hide." I believed her. Not because I trusted her, but because I didn't care anymore. I'd sold the watch, donated the $20,000, 0 cents to a local charity for kids' art programs. Claire's latest exhibit was a hit, her painting selling out in hours. I was working on a new startup, something that could change how we protect data. Port Solis sparkled under the sun, its cliffs and waves no longer heavy with secrets. That night, I stood on my balcony, the lighthouse beam sweeping the horizon. The ocean was calm, a mirror reflecting the stars. I thought of Dad's words, "You'll never be enough," and smiled. I was enough, for Claire, for myself, for the life I'd built from the ashes of their betrayal. The letter was just paper now, not a chain. I tore it up, let the pieces scatter in the wind, and walked back inside. The waves kept whispering, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was free.